This is a Parsha podcast brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study, and I'm your host, Yosefa Fogel-Rubel. Let's learn. Hi, Matana community. This is a special Shavuot episode, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Elana Stein Hain. Hi, Elana.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Who's the Rosh Beit Midrash and Senior Fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. She's the author of Circumventing the Law, Rabbinic Perspectives on Loopholes and Legal Integrity, and she's the co-host of Texting, a podcast that brings Torah into conversation with contemporary Jewish life. She gives a weekly Big Ideas Shir on Daf Yomi for Hadran called Din and Daf, and she is currently living with her family in Jerusalem. I had on Elana for Parshat Vayechi, and I really just wanted an excuse to talk to her again. So welcome back, Elana. And I thought, who else to speak about our love for Torah? That is what I want us to talk about today on our special Shavuot episode, to speak about the role of our Torah life, our Torah learning, and a little bit how we got to these spaces, and what's the meaning, and also how it sort of is still our guide in our lives today. I guess I wanted us to first start on like a little bit of a spiritual biography, Elana. Where did your love maybe for learning, maybe it was a natural pull towards religious life, where did that originate?
Okay, so here's what I have to say. I went to all of it, day school, religious home, so I would be nowhere without all of that.
Yeah. Right?
So where did it originate? It originated in the stories I was told in kindergarten, and the songs that we sang, and, hearing Kiddush at home. Like, it originated in all of that. I think that where I started becoming conscious of it in a sort of, well, how am I going to engage in this kind of way? I can pinpoint an image, and I can pinpoint like a time in my life. So the image is it's a split screen. I want you to have a split screen in your head. My dad wearing tefillin, talis and tefillin in our house, davening, because he was a lawyer, very busy, many hours a day, would have to leave early frequently. But I often came down for my pre-bus breakfast, and there he was in his talis and tefillin, and that seared into my head. And my mom with the old Sansino, they were like pink and red.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sansino Navi that she's learning for a class that she's going to go to, or that she just came back from, and she's looking over her notes. So like that split screen in my head, like that was a constant in my life over and over and over again. So you can't really ignore that, right? Like it seeps in. And then in terms of my own life, and I would shout this from the rooftops as often as I could, somehow clearly in 4th grade, I must have loved learning, because my Chumash teacher said to my parents, Mrs. Rachel Frazier, she said to my parents, Elana loves Torah learning. You should give her the opportunity to do it anytime she can. And so the next year, I was in like a Pirkei Avot chug on Shabbos afternoon, and then my parents hired a Gemara teacher for me and a few of my friends after school to learn. It was like they took it and ran with it. Clearly, she saw something that I don't know if I can go back to my 4th grade self, but she saw something, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I love this. Like this, and things just started integrating, I would say. Can you pinpoint?
Wait. Before you go, where are you growing up? Where am I putting you?
I was growing up in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Okay,
but it wasn't like
before
crazy.
Teaneck was Teaneck.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy concentrated from Teaneck. It was like before my shul made an expansion because they needed
more space.
An expansion because they needed more space. It wasn't like that. And I went to Yavna Academy, and it was like, I don't know, it was just a teacher who saw a kid who clearly was in love with this stuff and said, give her more. And it became, I have a very analytical mind. So to be able to attach to something like that, it's like a tether. It's like a tether.
Did you also love your other subjects, or was it like a special affinity for Torah?
Special affinity. I like other subjects. Don't get me wrong. I like math.
As a kid,
I like reading.
You liked going to school in the morning?
I liked going. I was a school kid. I was a school kid.
Okay.
But this was like, wow.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was something like, in The Incredibles, when like Mr. Incredible comes.
I've already lost the reference. I'm so sorry.
Oh, come on. It's this great cartoon.
It's the family of superheroes?
Yes.
Oh, so I think, okay.
He comes, I think it happens twice in the movie where he comes to his home and there's a little kid sitting there in like one of these little tykes cars.
Yeah.
And the kid's just sitting there staring. He goes, what are you waiting for? He goes, something amazing. That is how I felt.
Right.
Something amazing. And then I could give words to what the something amazing was about it, but I'm sure we'll get there. But I'm curious about you. And we knew each other not when you were that young.
No, I didn't meet you then. No,
Not
I was
that when
already
you were
in
that
college.
Yes.
The only thing I have in my conscious memory, first of all, I will say, and while I hate this phrase, but it was said to me my entire childhood, is that I was always an intense child.
Ooh, intense.
I hated that.
Intense.
I hate that word till today because while it might be true, it was said too many times to me. It was overused.
Sorry.
So I was an
Sorry.
intense kid, okay?
Okay.
And that meant that I always felt things big and I loved things a lot. Do you know what I'm saying? Meaning there was, all that stuff.
I do know what you're saying.
It wasn't in a negative way. Like I think I was a fun kid. Like I think it was a good thing.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. No, I mean, there were kids who would like it be a lot for their parents. Like that wasn't the story. But I was just like, I loved things and felt passionate about them. But from a very young age, and this I do not have any clear conscious memory of, from a very young age, I had like a deep need for things to be meaningful and a deep draw towards things that I couldn't see.
Oh.
So I don't have like a story here of like Nevuah as a child. Like that's not the story. But I didn't have any words for the things I'm telling you right now. Like I could only years later be able to put words to
Totally.
that. But I had like this really, really profound need for things that were meaningful, that were going to utilize like the fullness, I think, of my humanity. And what that landed on as like a 10, 11, 12-year-old was a life of mitzvot. Meaning from a very young age, I grew up in a religious family, but on the chill spectrum of it.
Okay.
And from
The chill.
Yeah.
Oh, there's modern Orthodox and there's chill Orthodox.
Right, yeah, whatever. Again, lovely and all those things. But so from a younger age, like I think I grabbed on to the religious language that was available to us in the States at that time, which was the language of halacha, even though later on that definitely probably shouldn't have been. Like, we'll talk about that. Meaning, I wish I would have had a fourth grade teacher who said, learn Torah, because it took me until I was 18 to realize that I had never been fed the food that I really, really needed, because it never came my way. And the teachers that I always loved school. Also, clearly was a schoolgirl, loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we're both sitting here in our glasses.
Yeah,
that happened somehow. Probably a lot of reading.
Exactly. So we'll talk about that because there was something that was very missing. But for me, what it was as a kid was grabbing onto like religious life, finding figures that I felt were living meaningfully. And a lot of that came through summer camp at a certain age.
Oh,
Because
nice.
I didn't find it as much. It wasn't, I guess somehow I didn't identify with that thing I was looking for in my school experience. But I identified it very deeply in my summer camp. It was Camp Masorah. That was very,
really
very meaningful
nice.
for me. But I didn't have any, like, I speak to people now and young people now, and people have a lot more awareness and like have a lot more awareness of like and many more things to name their emotional language. Now it can go in bad directions. We all know what the world looks like right now. But I see how much more ability they have to express themselves.
Well, social emotional learning.
Yeah. So you're sort of mentioning that your journey obviously rooted in your family life and an awareness of the mitzvah observance in your family.
Yeah.
But that thing kind of the fire was fed through your learning.
Yeah.
And what is that thing you were looking for? I mean, you alluded to it.
So I think this is not going to be so sunny. I think people are great, but I also think people can do very bad things.
Yeah.
And the world can be a very unjust place. And the idea that God would be watching it all and would ultimately hold people accountable for the good and for the bad was a very, very important idea for me. Very, very important idea. I can't specify the particular injustices that were troubling me, but there was some sense that this world is such chaos and that there must be something beyond. There must be a morality beyond. There must be. And when I discovered Torah, the idea was, what does it look like for people to spend their time trying to reach for that reality? That is like the most breathtaking. It was just the most breathtaking thing in the world to me, right? Not out of selfishness, not out of self-aggrandizement, not out of, just, kind of frittering away the time, but I was saying, what does a godly life look like? And I think in some ways, Tanakh inspired me in the sense that God thinks that it is positive to engage with human beings, even though human beings are so flawed. So in some ways that gives me like just a basic sense. But I think I fell in love with Gemara because Chazal are trying to figure out how to live a godly life. And they don't have a revelation option to tell them. They have to use what they have of revelation and use what they don't have, right? And still try to figure it out. So to me, that was like, oh wow, that's human beings trying to be better. And that's really it.
So I love this because what you're saying is that it's the relatability that you're living life that's much closer to how Chazal are living life, right? That right there.
I mean, except for like the churning butter and
many daily elements of living.
I shower daily.
Right. I'm proud of you, Elana.
And we have toilet paper.
Yes.
I'm just saying there are a whole host of interesting things.
It's true, but
it's a constant churn. It's a constant attempt to say human beings always need to strive for more, and God is asking us to strive for more.
I'll tell you why this is interesting, because the reason why my journey has focused more on the Tanakh side, and I learned in Gemara for many years, but it never ignited me in that way, is because I'm going back to that. I feel like I'm going to cry actually, but I'm going back to that thing I'm always trying to find the thing that's beyond what I'm seeing. And that mystery for me lives in like the biblical text more. And there's something about the everyday regularity. I have often said, I don't say it so much because it sounds very bad, but why not say it in public to many, many, many people on this forum?
Or just the people listening.
Yeah, just people listening.
Just us.
That I'll often say that I have a hard time. First of all, I'm not an analytical mind, so that's also always made a Gemara a non-natural space for me to land.
Okay.
But also, like, the depth of its humanity is hard for me.
Of the Gemara.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's really
two sides, same coin. On the other side,
exactly.
The depth of its humanity is literally what I need.
I know. So isn't it so interesting?
Mystery.
I do. I like mystery.
Yeah. Was there a first, I don't know, it could be a parak in Tanakh, it could be a sefer. Was there a first something where you were like, whoa, this is it, something amazing that beyond what I can see? Like I'm waiting for you to be like, yes, when I learned Yechezkel, when I was 9 years old. You know what I mean? Like I'm curious, what's little Yosefa being drawn to within Tanakh?
So I think that's it, though. I wasn't drawn first to Tanakh. Tanakh I grew into when I was older. Like meaning, and again, I'm going to go back to this piece.
Because you're saying you didn't have that
So I want to go back to that piece.
Okay, I missed it. I missed the sensitivity there.
I'm sad about it, meaning I want to put that out there for all young women who are living in a space where that wasn't offered. Now, again, today we live in a world, there's more opportunities, there's awareness of online learning, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I went to religious institutions, but there wasn't a learning component that was particularly significant. And there could have been another easy choice in the space where I grew up, but that wasn't where my parents were sending me, and I didn't yet have a sense enough that I would have needed that. You know what I'm saying? Like if I would have, I can think of a name, I won't say it, but if I would have gone to a different high school, the story would have been different. Do you know what I'm saying? But I was in a space where there was very strong secular studies, and the Judaic studies was pretty mediocre. Okay. And I just and the teachers, there was quite a gap between the slightly more Haredi bend of the teachers in the institution and where the students actually were at. And while I didn't know it then, because again, didn't have language for it, I was searching for a Judaism that was highly integrated. And if I talk about where I ended up landing on the Datilumi version. Yeah. But I didn't have words for that. And all I knew was that me, who was always so close to her counselors and always wanted to be friends with older people and always sought out guidance, I never connected with any of my teachers in high school. And so you know what I'm saying? I never had like that association of like, oh, well, she teaches this kind of Torah, so I like that kind of Torah. Like nothing ever worked.
It's so interesting because the combination of not having strong enough Torah study in school and your role models not actually being role models of the hashkafa that you're looking for. Yeah. I think if you have 1 out of 2, you're okay. Yeah. Because I remember my Frisch experience, and I had a teacher, Rabbi Kovitz, Zichrono Livracha. He came from Kovitz. Oh, Kovitz. Oh, that wasn't even a thought. Rabbi Kovitz. Okay. He was our Gemara Rebbe, and he was from the more yeshivish community, and he was like, my goal for the year is I want you to learn like 55 Tosvasin in Masachet Shabbat. Oh, wow. You see how I say Tosvasin, but then I say Masachet Shabbat? Yeah. That's what I am. I don't know what to say. He's like, that's my goal. That's what you guys are going to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. Now, he was sitting Shiva for his wife. I went to his separate seating Shiva. Like, and he was like, Elana, come here. Right? And I was a grown-up by then when I went to see him sitting Shiva. And he was like, come here. So I was allowed to be an exception in his world. Yeah. And in some ways, he was an exception in mine. But because the learning was exceptional. Wow. So it's an interesting That's
a really interesting educational point about that. Like, yeah, I missed out on both of those.
That's what it sounds like. If
somebody had handed me, I really could cry thinking about this. I've tried not to think about this.
I'm sure.
If someone had handed me like Rav Soloveitchik, or like anything that was going to be beyond like a basic Musar text, or really we never did beyond like Rashi and a little bit of Ramban and Chumash, and I liked it. I was happy in all those. I loved learning. I always loved learning. And here I'll go back to the home, which grew over the years, but I didn't see learning in that way modeled in my house. My parents would, my father's a Chon Avrachai, can't sign off on anything, but my parents, they would sign off on that statement. Yeah. Meaning I didn't see that modeled. Today, my mom goes to 55 shiurim a week, and it's part of the growth of Torah learning in general in our world. But I didn't see that modeled. So I knew when I went to camp, I literally couldn't not sit on the edge of my seat when I had like shir, and we had a lot of Torah learning in Masorah. Like it was very serious.
Masorah was on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that?
Yes.
That was a cheer.
Yes, it was a cheer.
Masorah is on fire.
Exactly. So like there was a lot of learning there, and it was very moving. But I never knew that I could learn on my own, or that I could or that I could it never connected.
That's hard.
And I just never knew that I hadn't yet met like a community that was like women learn Torah.
I bet you a lot of people listening to this, your story resonates with them. Yeah. And I think that's very powerful. I want to ask you a personal question, and if you don't want to answer, don't answer. Yeah. I wonder, like when people decide, okay, I'm going to be a professional lawyer, doctor, psychiatrist, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. A psychiatrist is a type of doctor. I'm doing great here. And I'm also going to learn Torah on the side and give shiurim on the side, versus saying, no, Torah is going to be my life, Torah learning, Torah teaching. Do you think that part of Torah learning, Torah teaching being your life is a desire to A, make up for lost time, B, make things better for the next generation?
The truth is that until this conversation, I never ever thought about it like that. Like until this moment, right now.
I charge $150 an hour for a session.
I will forever feel like I'm making up for lost time. Forever. I'll feel like I'm making up for lost time. Sometimes I think back if I can calculate how many hours I played basketball. For those who don't know, I actually was a semi-professional basketball player
You
as
were
a
a
younger
good
person.
basketball player.
Yeah, I played in a professional league in Israel also when I already had a few kids. Yeah, if I could exchange all those hours I played basketball for, a little Mishnah and Gemara, I sometimes wonder what would have happened. But I don't really play that game. But when I was younger, I used to think that. I will always feel like I'm making up for lost time, no matter what. But although that is, I will say, is not in your case, but is also a female plight.
Yes, I think a lot of people feel that. A lot of people feel that.
But I don't, Elana. I don't think that I am doing something because I didn't get it. No, I don't think that that's where I'm acting from. I also didn't plan on being a teacher. That's a whole story in of itself. But meaning, it developed over time. But it wasn't something that I had always planned on. Maybe we can get there a little bit later.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate your honesty. Yeah. I'm really asking out of an organic, just thinking through.
And it was clear to you at a certain point that you wanted to stay in Torah professionally?
I just knew I wanted to learn Torah for as long as I could.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of teaching Torah, po v'sham. I don't know. I did a doctorate that doesn't necessarily have to result in teaching other people as your primary. You could do research, you could write books, you could, I thought I was going to be a lawyer for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then I deferred law school and then didn't go. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be a lawyer. I think these are different modes for me. I think what I get out of learning, if I'm sitting just with my Gemara at home, or I'm sitting among, a group of people who are learning, I think I get that sense of connection to God, humility before Hashem, a sense of belonging, identity, deep meaning, deep purpose. And I think when I'm teaching, what I'm trying to do is give that to other people, and hope that they're feeling that, and that's like a double load of happiness, because I'm feeling it when I'm teaching, and I'm also trying to give it to somebody else. So I think in some ways, teaching was inevitable for me. I just didn't necessarily always know it. It's like when you love something and you want to give it to other people because you care about other people. Mm-hmm. So it went something like that. I think I'm definitely motivated in certain respects, like when I get tired of teaching and when I get, I just need a break. And I think I'm often motivated by, I want to give people something that I was yearning for. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that sense that the world has no coherence, I want to help people who feel like the world has no coherence have somewhere to be. So I'm definitely motivated by what I would. Yes, I'm definitely motivated, and I probably feel it most when I'm most tired and I would like to just, take a nap for a while. But yeah, it's definitely in there for me. I guess that's why I asked the question of you. Yeah. It's definitely in there for me.
Yeah, I grew up my whole life saying that I was going to be a doctor. Which, from kids who have some academic acumen. Yeah, it's like a thing. So I said I was going to be a doctor, and then I realized I don't like science. I don't like learning science.
You'd be like, hi, I'm your doctor. I majored in the humanities.
Yeah.
I know nothing about your brain other than the emotions that it causes for you.
Exactly.
No.
So I realized at a certain point, I was already in college. I started pre-med and then left it.
Wow.
But you actually said something that I really actually wanted to express gratitude towards this, because you said, well, I delayed law school and then I wrote a doctorate, but I don't necessarily have to work in the doctorate. And meaning you and I just see, let's say, the environment my children are growing up in, which is totally different. We grew up in an environment that rewarded and made space for us to pursue lives of meaningful knowledge. Do you sign off on that sentence?
I sign off. I had total support from everyone in my life.
Yeah.
Total support.
Okay, but it's a big deal because not everybody has that ability to sit. Well, I'm going to spend 4 years doing this project, and I'm going to learn another 2 years. And the fact of the matter is that to go deep into any field of knowledge, and you need many years to do that, and you need a society that supports the pursuit of that.
Yes.
And there's so many elements in here. There's the liberal arts concept in the States, which doesn't exist at all in the same way in Israel.
Yep.
There's the male-female piece, depending on where you are. And, I also had a supportive family and sometimes tarte mashma, like meaning to say, we believe in this happening. So sit another 2 years, and that it's such an integral piece. At a certain point, it utterly maxes out, and you have to have a life that is something that, you could support. And as you grow up to be an adult and you want to be able to live a life that you can support.
Well, one of the things that I think is significant is I wanted to do a second year in Israel in my gap year, and my parents said no.
Oh, so did mine.
And they said the reason why we're saying no is because we want you to start the next chapter.
Yeah.
And if you want to come back and learn later, you can come back and learn later. And I was unhappy about it, but in the end, it worked. And if I had done a second year, that would have worked too. You know what I mean? Meaning, but they as parents looked at me and said, no, we need you to keep moving.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I think one of the reasons why I thought I was going to be a lawyer is my parents said to me, you have to make sure that you can make a living. It's very important that you can make a living.
Yeah.
So even if you get your law degree and you don't use it that much, or you just think about how you're going to make a living. And I think I have a lot of respect for parents being able to say to their kids, I want you to pursue what's important to you, and I want to make sure that you can put food on your table, right? Like those two things have to happen at the same time. And that's not because parents don't care. It's because life is real. It's not just in the mystery, and it's not just in the life has some coherence in the ether, but not in my actual life. So that was a pill that I had to swallow and understand. And it took time for me to get that.
I definitely understood that, and it's what actually made me leave this field almost twice, because it was just almost impossible to make
just
viable.
unsustainable.
Yeah. Thankfully I didn't, and I'm not leaving it, but there were like 2 big moments of my life where it was like probably going to throw this all out the window because I can't live like
I believe
this.
it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an opportunity to give a shout out to people who support Torah learning as a profession, and I mean financially support it, because without them, you don't have proper salaries for people, you don't have proper parental leave for people, you don't have the possibility of growth, right? And it really takes a village.
Yeah.
And that's something I also didn't understand. Because it takes, by the way, the practice of law also takes a village, right? But I knew about that village, right? I didn't think about who's behind the curtain, who created migdalos that I wouldn't have been able to go to without it, right? Who hired the teachers that I had in elementary school and high school who were willing and excited to teach me, right? Like I didn't see all that, but as an adult in this field, you see the necessity of creating a whole community of support so that if people end up choosing this path, it's a viable path.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so critical. I mean, you already actually mentioned a few, but do you have another name of someone who was really influential on you, either in your religious life or learning life?
Yeah, there's 2 that are more concrete and one that's more abstract, because I never met the last one.
Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm joking.
So the one that I never met was Professor Nechama Leibovitz, Zichrona Livracha.
Yeah.
And learning about her, I realized, oh my gosh, you could spend your whole life learning and teaching Torah. Holy cow, that's amazing. You can do that. So I remember when I was on Sulam, what is that, post 10th grade Sulam?
I was on that also. Our lives are weirdly related, Elana.
I know. Hila Zeira, now Hila Weinstein, who was my counselor then, who I'm still close with, who I think I could also count as a Torah role model for me, because she was in the midst of doing her law school and also learning Torah at Matan in free time. I think she's the first person who told me about Rav Holland. I think I heard about Rav Holland from her first.
Yes.
So that, I remember she took me on a Friday that we had free from Sulam. I really wanted to see Professor Leibovitz's kever. So she took me and we searched around and we found it because that was the only way I was going to meet her.
Yeah.
That was my only meeting opportunity. So that was very in a more abstract way because I had her sperm on my shelf as a kid. The blue, light blue, dark blue, right? It was like, oh, there she is. So I'd say that. And another major influence on me beyond my family, because my Saba is definitely in there, is Rabbi Yitzchak Twersky, who was my teacher in high school, who was the first person for
what
me.
a high school staff. Oh my God.
And and Dr. Meyer, she was also amazing. We had a great, Frisch was fantastic. But I remember he was one of the first people who I saw blend a deep ruchnius with a deep penetrating analysis of Torah. That combination, I was blown away. I was just blown away. Just such a profound spiritual life in that person, and such mesirut nefesh to learn Torah. I was so blown away, let alone from the actual content of the Torah that he taught me. Over time, completely changed the way that I looked at Tanakh, completely changed the way that I looked at Gemara. Like everything. He taught us Tanakh for 2 years, and he taught us Gemara, Masechet Rosh Hashanah for 1 year. Just literary insight. It just palaces of Torah. Wow. And like real tmimut. Like real deep tmimut. How about you? I know you wouldn't say anything before, but do you have names that you want to share?
I'm going to go back to the concept of the experience because, there's people that are like posek shoppers. People look around and...
Nope, never heard of it.
No, never heard of it.
Nope,
okay, so
everyone's very consistent. You go to one person, even if they say no, when you want them to say yes, you listen to them anyway.
So I'm a little bit of like... I'm a wisdom seeker by nature. So I really, and I didn't have words for that as a kid. It was just like, oh, why are you always interested in so many things that so many people have to say? Again, I didn't have words for it, but I found myself being profoundly influenced by lots and lots of people and experiences over the years. And then over time, when you develop more like who you are and who you want to be, so then you start choosing sort of a little bit like where you're going to, draw those influences from. But I think it would be remiss not to mention my year in Israel, which I spent in the first year of Shalavim for Women.
Nice.
Which was run then by Dr. Hani Tannenbaum. And Michelle Amalei, who still runs it, was very, very much influential for me. I want to say that it was literally like I had not been given water for like my entire teenage years. And then I got there and like bing, like all of a sudden like the whole thing opened and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I had been looking for. So I want to say that like it was also a great experience and it was a funky experience. It was the first year and there were a lot of funny things about it. But I really was like deeply searching for something. So like when I got something that was like remotely related to what I clearly had needed, just like an intellectual engagement and like, candor and devotion, but coupled with, all that good stuff. So it was sort of mamash, like mamash amazing water that was needed. But I would say that once I was deeper into that space, I think, and this is a little bit related to your example, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but he kind of knows, so it's fine.
Oh, now I'm curious.
I think I would say that my time also in Yeshiva University, which happened almost against my will, because at that point I had wanted to stay in Israel and likely to move to Israel and not actually come back. And my parents said, no, and come back. And by then I was still pretending I was going to be a doctor. So, you're going to come back and you're going to get to go to medical school for free. And those things which never happened.
Oh, you did that thing.
Well, I didn't do it, but I said I was.
You could get a full scholarship to Einstein.
Right. So I didn't know I was, in the end I didn't even go for it.
No, but it's.
So I Ki'ilu went to YU not wanting to be there. And I actually had a very, very hard time those 3 years. I was very unhappy being outside of Israel. That's a different topic. but I had a profoundly unbelievable experience. And while I literally got on a plane 3 weeks after I graduated, I was so happy that I spent 3 years in that institution. It gave me an unbelievable basis that I would not have been able to get anywhere else at that point in where learning was happening for women. Things are different now. I'm making no statements about any institutions, but it was an experience that wouldn't have been able to happen anywhere else.
That's great.
And so there were definitely some really, really influential people for me there, but I will make a special shout out to Rabbi J.J. Schachter, who was really, really meaningful for me. He did not know me then. I years later, introduced myself to him. I was in one of these ridiculously big classes of 60 people. I wasn't even twice a week, and I had many classes. I'll say in a minute somebody else, but I was profoundly moved by his, similar to yours, related, a profound, clear sense of Avodat Hashem coupled with academic rigor. That was a combination that left a very strong impression on me. And while I didn't yet know I was going to do that, it ended up being a very significant compass for me over time. Wow. Also going into the messy pardis that is Tanakh, academia, and putting yourself in that, and it was a really, really strong guide. All of those people in YU that I knew then, who were really frum people but were really serious about their academia, that was very profound for me. I'll just one other shout out, and him also, was Rabbi Kahn. Rabbi Kahn was Zichrono Livracha, was my first real introduction to Gemara learning, and Halacha B'iyun. That was my first real introduction to it, and after that was able to pursue it in other spaces, but he was my first real introduction, and that was also, I would say up till today, he was the space where I really felt I ever got a derech halimud. Wow. A way of learning, a way of accessing text. I definitely got that in Tanakh from other spaces, but in terms of Gemara and Rishonim specifically, it was from him. So yeah, those were my people. I think there's been many people that are influential since then, but I'm going with the foundational spaces.
I love it. That's beautiful.
Okay, Elana, we're not dancing around this. We know that any religious life lived by any person has tension in it. It's a fact, right?
Certainly.
It's a fact. We're humans. We have our own tensions without any connection to our religious selves, and especially when we're living with our modern sensibilities, upkeeping, safeguarding a system that dates back to probably forever. There's going to be some tensions there. And so I was curious, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about whether specifically in your lived experience of mitzvah observance, or even something specifically in the Torah, a space where you do experience tension now, not then, not when you were developing as, but now, something that you feel that that there's energies there that aren't completely calmed.
Look, I am academically trained. Mm-hmm. I think that history is real. Mm-hmm. And I think that Torah was given in a time and in a place. And I think that actually affects what the Torah says. Mm-hmm. I don't think that if the Torah was given in the 21st century, it would allow you to keep slaves, but just let them go if you break their teeth. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
And being aware of that means that I make my peace with the fact that Torah speaks very much in the male idiom, and that Chazal speak very much in the male idiom. But where I think things are difficult, are that I'm going to put it this way, and Rav Kook talked about it like this, and Rav Yuval Sherlo talks about it like this, the concept of derech eretz, not as in menschlichkeit, mm-hmm. but as in the ways of the world, the moral conventions of the world. I see plenty of moral conventions that are wrong in the world, but I also see plenty that are right, and they're different from Torah. And the ability to figure out how you square the morality of the Torah, which was given in a time and a place, and is meant to be our access point yet to Ritzon Hashem, and moral conventions that you see in the world that you say, these also seem godly. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with those? And there's a whole host of those. Yeah. But I think an honest acknowledgement of that very real tension is something that, it's really just mirroring what a lot of people listening to this feel. right? And how do you? And I think it ends up being on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Right? Is it a question of authority? And that's the question of whether you can reconcile or not. Is it a question of whether it's a mirage that these moral conventions seem good, right? That you shouldn't trust yourself, which I genuinely don't believe. Is it chok, and therefore you bend to God's will and that's where you are? But I do think that it's a case-by-case conversation, and I don't think it's a all or nothing kind of conversation.
So first of all, I just want to say that those questions are like the bread and butter of what I deal with on a regular basis at work, meaning in our life as people who, to a certain degree, kind of represent part of the system or represent the system. So we're constantly called upon to think out those questions with our students, with the people who we love. This is, and it, of course we live it in our daily life. Like this completely and utterly resonates. I can tell you 3 classes just this week I was teaching that are all on that scale of those questions. 100%, I agree with that. And it's really, a lot of times I think the question is where somebody lies on the spectrum of contextualizing, whether it's Torah, meaning Chamisha Chomshei Torah, contextualizing Chazal, that question of how much do we contextualize versus how much of it are we looking at in a divine space, ends up being what I think creates like the gradations between how people approach this.
I would put it even a little bit differently, which is you can think about it as divine and contextual. You can think about it as divine and acontextual.
Yeah.
And I think it's harder when you say it like that. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think God wants slavery today either.
Yeah, no, and
right?
I definitely don't
and I think
so.
Torah is divine.
Yes, I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I would answer 2 very quick pieces. One, if I could speak about what's genuinely something that creates, that's a source of tension. Again, here there's a blurring between personal and professional, but I'm a yotzei halacha. I answer halacha questions on a daily basis in the realm of Hilchot Nida. And I have some thoughts about Hilchot Nida, meaning that's something that again, I spent years deciding if I wanted to be a representative of that area of our religious lives, and decided that I was ready at a certain point. But it was a process. Like I wasn't saying like, oh, I love learning Torah, so I'll learn Hilchot Nida. Like I was already old enough and married long enough and had enough children to be like, no, I want to be ready to do this, because then you're putting yourself in lots of very, very sensitive spaces. So I'm not going to give more detail than that, but I would say that there's tensions that arise in those spaces that I both teach every single week and trying to advance what I think are healthier kinds of conversations, like in those realms that I do believe impact the halacha and will continue to impact the halacha. But I'll just say that on a daily basis, I have lots of tension, but it's about my role as being a parent, and that causes me, takes up a ton of space. So that's my answer of what, like, I don't feel like at this stage of my life, I'm living out all those questions. But when I am coming home, it's not necessarily what's occupying my thoughts. But that's because I have the pleasure of being able to think about it at work, quote unquote. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not because it's not important to me, but it's because I think about that there. But when I'm at home, there are many other things that are occupying my thoughts. Yeah. I guess maybe I would end with this question, which is, I just brought it up in a negative context, but I'm curious if you can go back, we go back to that image that you first gave of like your father with his talit and your mother with her sansino. Love that, by the way. I'm remembering that. I know where it is in my mom's house. Yeah. I know where it is. So I'm wondering how you see, what does your contribution look like right now, like in your family sphere?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because I have boys.
Yeah.
And I see how they experience davening with me versus davening with their male role model. And it is different. They like davening more with their male role model.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. So from my perspective, I think what I'm doing is I'm giving them that ambient Torah and religiosity that they may not want to, if I'm the one who is offering to take somebody to Minyan, they may be like, nah, I'm going with Dad. But they still have that image of me davening in our living room, the way that I had that image of my father. Mm-hmm. And they still have that image of me, making sure that we write, like, what parsha is it this week on this? Or they still have that image of me when they're going to bed and I'm sitting with the Gemara on the couch. Or when my husband and I are learning together and they hear it and they see, or when before they want to watch a TV show, I make them learn a Mishnah. It's a little bit of a humble brag, because it's like how much Mishnah they learn also tells you how much TV they've watched, which is not amazing. But like, it's there. I try to make sure that it's just always there, like in the air. And you, despite your misgivings of not being able to think about slavery at home?
Right. Look, we're definitely, Zevi and I are both learners. He's I think on his 4th cycle of Daf Yomi of his life.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, he's a Gemara, more of the Gemara aficionado in the family. Although between us, he's a Bekiyut person and I'm an Iyun person by nature. Very, very, very clear differentiation between us.
Yeah.
I have the opposite story of you. I have 4 daughters and I now have a 2-year-old boy. And the 4 daughters thing made me unable to just kind of bury things that are difficult.
Right.
That I might want to bury.
See previous question.
Right. Exactly. That regarding women and women's, roles in Torah life, and specifically in the cultural environment that I'm in, that we've chosen to live in. Yeah. There are some things that, I definitely, they're the bread and butter of my life because I teach women. That's who I teach. Yeah. But I have 4 daughters. And that makes it like, it's a high price tag. And so there's a lot of impact. I will also say that vis-a-vis my children, they are now aware that their mother is a rabbanit. Like that awareness exists for them.
That's a nice awareness.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I learn with all my kids. Those are obvious to me. Like we learn Torah, we're learning house, but I actually think more, because the learning almost is easier access. I think more about, in Israel, we like to talk about our olam ruchani, like our, inner religious lives. And I feel like I'm still, and my kids are, some of them are bigger, I'm still observing what I think will be meaningful for each of them, because the answer is very different for all of them.
Totally.
I have my first kid, meaning she's my 3rd, who's you in that 4th grade class. Yeah. It's so fun, because she's my first one like that.
It's easy.
Yeah, and she's just like, just drink it up, and we're just trying to make sure that we give her opportunities, And so, but each of my kids, like all of our kids, need something a bit different, and we obviously can't provide that fully for any of them, and that's fine. But I definitely am on the vision side of these things in my home, and that I'm aware. I feel there's a heaviness of responsibility, not because I'm overstating my role, but because I really do have 4 daughters. Yeah. and a boy, and like we went, 11 years where it was like very much that, like, I'm the model, kiviyachol, the natural model for them. Right. Even give you a tiny example, and I know we're going to end soon, which is that my husband and I recently I'm just going to give it because I think it's an interesting example for people to think about if they've never. Yeah. We recently came to the conclusion that, because for years we would take turns on like special tefillot to go to them, like the tefillah of the Yom Ha'atzmaut, because we always had a kid who, like, it was just not worth it to go to shul to go with them. Yeah. And we just haven't, thank God, left those years yet. And so we would always make choices about like who went where. And that already I know was a bigger step. There are some homes where it will be clear that the husband goes, but okay, that was clear. My husband always goes to shul really early, and that was like, it's super important for him. But we would make choices, whether it was like Eicha and Tisha, like we would make choices about these like special occasions. And on a regular Shabbat, my 2 oldest girls go to the early minyan with my husband, which like slightly frustrates me, but I also appreciate that they're going. So my mouth is shut. Right. Exactly. But we recently came to the conclusion that we can't do that anymore, because if they don't have a mother to sit with, then they just are all over the place.
Right.
And it doesn't work anymore. And so, like we said, okay, right now our decision is that, and there's more than one. There's a lot of these occasions that come up. It's all different kinds of things. We said the decision is now, and even though I would be perfectly happy to go later or like, sit with the baby at home, but it's not working right now because there's too much of a mass of young lady that like needs their woman, to their mother to be their model for them. And so there's all these little pieces, but like all these little pieces that, yes, a lot of the women and Judaism and the developing role that we are having, that I'm watching it unfold in different kinds of ways, like in my own home, what are the expected things in the community that we're living in, which are not necessarily always things that I agree with, and sometimes it's positive, sometimes negative. But that to me is, I think, I wouldn't say, I don't like the word tension. I know I asked it. I don't love the word tension because I don't like living with tension like that. But it's something that's a constant work in progress. And I'm very curious how my kids will one day summarize what it is that they came away with. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm sure that each of them will
summarize it at all.
Right. And each of them will have something different. Like I often think about that. Like my oldest kid will have spent so many years without her mother in shul because I had to do other things, and then my younger kids will have more access to that because I won't be, home with a baby. So like, there's just like these things. I like sometimes try and externally observe myself. I often do this actually, but like try and observe what is that looking like to them right now? Like what's getting across?
It's interesting. And I guess I would end, this would be like my last comment, is one of the things that I love about having this conversation is that we're probing our internal religious lives. Yeah. And I think to go back to where we started, people's religious lives look very different from each other, sometimes because of, for one, it's their whole job. And for someone else, it's the 3 hours a week they can carve out between shul and some learning. But I think it's more than that. I think people are idiosyncratic. We saw our own conversation, even with similar upbringings, how differently we connected to things, and different kinds of people, different motivations. And there's something beautiful about spending a few minutes on Shavuot asking, what's my religious motivation?
Totally.
What's a little bit of my spiritual profile?
So think about that journey that people have taken throughout time.
Yeah. How did I get here?
Yeah.
I think that's a very beautiful thing to prepare for Shavuot, to use to prepare for Shavuot. So I appreciate you inviting me in to do this. And I hope that the listeners do the same.
Amen. Chag Matan Torah Sameach, Elana.
That's right. Chag Sameach, everybody. Kolot uvrakim, but fewer azakot.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode from Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please contact the Matan office or email me at podcast@matan.org.il. Please do us and all women's Torah learning a favor and share this episode with all of your friends and family.